beloved. It's Chelsea. How are you doing today, beloved? How are you doing? Our world seems to yet again be in a state of chaos. I'm here today, beloved, to share the word of the Lord with you. And then just connect. Just connect. One of the things that I love about the book of Acts is I look back and I see how the early church was. They were one. They were together. They shared the presence of God together. They shared worship together. They shared meals together, the breaking of bread. I'm sure they had conversations about things that were right and things that weren't right. They were one family. They were one people. I want to connect with you today. You know, beloved, my highest calling, besides being a worshiper, is an intercessor. And as an intercessor, sometimes you feel things so deeply. Sometimes you cry and you moan and you groan, and you don't even know why you're doing it. You don't know why there's a burden on you. You don't know why you feel so heavy, but you know that you have to pray through it. Eventually, you figure it out, that I'm feeling this way because God is calling me to a place of prayer. I'm carrying the burden for someone else. I'm carrying the burden that God has placed in my heart because I need to pray through this, to activate God's angels, to activate God's will here on earth, to be manifested from the supernatural to the natural. There's so much going on now. It's like, woo, a head spin. We've been dealing with so much concerning coronavirus, and then we get slapped with the events that are going on right now surrounding the death of George Floyd. My soul has been grieved. Even before this incident, beloved, I was in my prayer chair and I heard the Lord say to me, do you know that Dr. Martin Luther King was born to die? Do you know that he knew that he was going to die once his mission was complete? I said, God, that's weird. Like, why are you bringing this up? Why are you saying this to me? And then, beloved, the Lord began to drop memories in front of me. Two in particular. One from a program I'd watched some years ago on Sid Roth's It's Supernatural program. He had a prophet on. I can't remember this person's name. It was some time ago. But the prophet was talking about racism, how in the coming years in America, racism and rioting and violence was going to break out, but it was going to look different than it had in the past. I remembered that word that was shared on that program. The Lord also brought, beloved, to mind a book that I wrote. I think it was in 2007 I released it, called Mr. Kagan. This is a book that touches on racism. I felt like when I was writing this book, I was literally writing the memoir of someone who had been through this. This is a nonfiction work. I'm moved by it every time I think about it, because this to me is a real person. These are real people in these pages, even though this is a fictional work. The Lord used me to put this together. I'm going to be sharing some of it with you today. But beloved, as the Lord began to just talk to me about that, He also spoke to me about what to speak on programs, what the word of the Lord was, the Rhema word of the Lord. So you heard something last week. You heard about when God doesn't remove the cup. The program that's coming this coming Sunday, that was also pre-recorded. As I pray through, God, what are you saying? What do you want me to say right now to your people? And it's going to be, beloved, a program on being a burden bearer, about when God gives you burdens. I had no idea that any of this was going to happen. I was just praying and tapping into the Spirit of God to hear what He wanted me to say. Let me say this, beloved. For me, this ministry is about two things. It's about obedience to God, a love for God, and a love for you. This ministry is not a business. We are a 501c3 entity because I believe it's important to establish yourself legally and also to be able to provide receipts to people when they donate. But it's certainly not a business. I don't take a salary or anything of the sort from this ministry. I do it in obedience to God and in love for you, hoping that God would use me in a way that would help you in some kind of way, even if it's just the smallest little thing. Maybe you just flip the tube on and you need to see someone smiling. You need to see someone there. That's my prayer in my heart. So God always surprises me how He intricately weaves everything together. So what I'm saying is I don't plan programs. I don't plan recordings. I go and I ask God, Lord, what do you want me to say? Or what are you saying? If God says nothing, then I don't say anything. Today I'm going to share with you what God is saying, but I'm also going to share with you just some of what I'm feeling, some of what I've been through, because I think that as believers, it's important to connect. I think as believers, we have to know when to be silent and when to speak up, when to respond, when to just reach out and embrace someone, when to just reach out and say, hey, I don't have all the answers. I don't even know what I'm feeling, quite honestly, but I love you and you're part of the family. Can you just listen to me right now? Can I talk to you right now? So let's start with God. I'm telling you, beloved, I have been a ball of emotions for the last 2 weeks. Just groaning in the spirit. Just feeling icky. And at first, as an intercessor, when you start feeling these things, you don't always make the connection. I think by now I should, but quite honestly, I don't. A couple of weeks ago, I was having some really terrible fatigue, and I was like, this doesn't make any sense. Where did this come from? I've dealt with these issues. But when I connected the dots, I realized that I had been praying for and with a woman who was going through some symptoms, which included fatigue. So there was a connection there in the spirit. I spoke about that previously, and maybe that's a program for another day, as the Lord leads. But I was just feeling icky in the spirit, just icky physically, just emotionally, like all over the place. Finally, I realized that it was exactly what I had prepared the message on. The message you're about to see Sunday, I prepared it a couple of weeks ago about God giving you burdens. God was giving me a burden to pray through something. I had no idea what it was at the time. I had no idea that I was praying through evil in the atmosphere, the plans of the enemy, where he would use racism, where he would use division as his tool to bring disruption, to breed hate, and ultimately to bring division. Beloved, I heard someone say this once. Truth always trumps fact. It is a fact that we're in the midst of a coronavirus pandemic. It is a fact that the United States of America is currently up in turmoil with chaos and a lot of circumstances surrounding the death of George Floyd. However, the truth that trumps that fact is that God is still God. He's the most powerful God there is. This is not a surprise to him. He always wins. He always has an answer. And he always sees the end from the beginning. As I sat in my prayer chair last night, just feeling overwhelmed and overcome, as I sobbed, really sobbed soul cry over the incidents that had happened, over the things that continue to go on. As I sat there, beloved, and just sought to connect with the Lord, I just wanted to be in the secret place. I just wanted to wash everything off of me. I just wanted to feel the breeze of the Holy Spirit. As I sat there, this scripture came up. 1 Corinthians 2:5. That your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. I turned the pages of my notebook, and the scripture came up again. It was there again. From some notes I'd taken during my study time, October 26, 2018, your faith should be in the power of God. 1 Corinthians 2:5. That your faith should not stand in the wisdom of men, but in the power of God. In this situation, no man has all the answers. They can't. Certainly some may respond in a level of wisdom, and that wisdom comes from God. True wisdom comes from God. Solomon says the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God. So certainly, yes, some people are going to respond in some level of wisdom, some degree of wisdom, but ultimately our focus should be on the power of God, knowing that His truth, which is the truth, trumps every fact, everything that we're seeing right now. I want to say this also, beloved. God has emotions. God makes provision for emotions. We see His character. We see His emotions all throughout the Bible, but especially in the Old Testament. The Word even says, be angry and sin not. I think it's important to validate the emotions, the feelings, the fears that people are feeling right now. I'm feeling some myself. I'm feeling things, honestly, that I've never felt before. I'm trying to process all of this. I'm trying to just pray things out in the Spirit. The burden has not been lifted. I still feel a burden. I still feel the heaviness on my shoulders, as I'm sure many of you do. But I know my assignment is to pray through this, to pray for the family, to pray for God's wisdom, to pray for God's peace, to pray for the dismantling of the enemy, to pray for God's release of His angels and His holy entities, to bring justice, to bring reform, to bring His will here on the earth. You know, some of this we're going to have to go through. We have to get used to the idea of calamity. It's going to be a part of life. But we hold in our spirit man, we hold the power of God there to pray these things through, to dismantle them. I do believe some things can be eradicated completely. I do believe there are those other things that cannot completely be eradicated, but they can be diminished significantly. They can be put at bay. They can come under our feet. God determines just what and how much, but nothing can happen if we're not praying. God will do some things in His sovereignty. But for the majority of things, it requires our prayer. God has been calling us to a time of prayer for quite some time. But beloved, I just, again, want to echo that I think it's important for people to have a safe space that they can come to express their views, to express their opinions, to express what they're feeling in their heart. It's necessary to be able to do that. You know, a part of deliverance is to go through pain. Deliverance is not always as quick and as easy as come out and it's done. Sometimes there's some resistance there. Sometimes there's a lot of crying. Sometimes there's some flaring around that goes on. I think it's important to realize that things, especially like what we're seeing, this great evil, it's a process that requires not one but all. I think it's important, beloved, to look at the truth. And the truth is that some wicked and evil things have taken place in our nation. Some wicked and evil things have been taking place in our nation for a long time. And those things maybe never died, some of them. And now, rearing up their ugly head. Maybe some things are new. But it's also important for us to look and say that we don't respond to hate and evil with hate and evil. And it's also important to look and say that there are some good things that are taking place. There are some godly things that are taking place. I'm so grateful, beloved, to say that I cannot identify with the level of evil and racism that has been placed on some. I know what it is. I've experienced it myself. But I also know the opposite. In fact, for a long time, I remember as a little girl, I was not even aware of racism. I had been blessed so that I was surrounded by people whom I loved of all different races, particularly whites. My first best friend was a beautiful little girl with red hair and freckles. Her name was Becky. My older brother's first best friend, was a lovely little boy by the name of Austin. They were the children of my kindergarten teacher. They were a beautiful white family who would come over to my home and pick me and my brother up, and we would go over to this family's home. We played together with all kinds of toys, all kinds of games, and we ate together. There was such a love there. We didn't see color. It was never an issue. There was no talk about it. The only difference that we saw was a difference between children and adults. We were children, they were adults, and that was the only difference that I was aware of then. It wasn't, beloved, until I got in the 5th grade where I really became aware of cultural differences in a negative sense. I remember having a 5th grade teacher who was awesome. I love this woman. She was a black woman. I loved her. She was very ambitious, very educated, very full of soul and fire. Unfortunately, she had been faced with some prejudices in her lifetime, and it made her, I wouldn't say bitter, but it made her protective. During my year that I was in that class, I remember hearing her talk about certain things, about how a black woman in America has to do certain things and work harder and be better just to get something of value in terms of education and even status, and even in the realm of teaching. I became aware from hearing about how she had to speak to her 2 boys who were black boys about how they needed to present themselves and the things they had to be cautious about as they were going about their day-to-day lives. Also, beloved, in the 5th grade, there was a boy who was in my class. His name was Tony from Lebanon. And Tony was awesome. Tony, if you're watching, hey, how are you? I bet you're big and grown now. But I remember walking home with Tony and a group of some other people from our class or in the 5th grade. I remember walking home one day and Tony said to me, "You know, you're beautiful." He may have said pretty. This was a long time ago. He may have said pretty. Yeah, I think he said you're pretty. "You know, you're pretty." And at first it sounded like a compliment, but then he tagged on the piece, "for a black girl." Beloved, I know that Tony, in his little 5th grade mind, was trying to pay me a compliment, but it was not a compliment. What it did is made me more aware of how people from various different nationalities see a distinction with black people. Now again, I have to say I am super blessed because I really have not faced racism to the level that some in our country have, but I've watched some things happen. I have encountered a little bit, not a lot, but I've watched some things happen, I would say more so with my brothers who are young black men. I've watched some things happen, some injustices happen there with him. I had an incident with a police officer too. I'm not going to go into all of that. But my point here is that it is necessary for us to acknowledge that some people, regardless of their race, some people have faced injustices And it's okay to speak out about that. We can't let it consume us. We have to look at the source where it's coming from. We have to realize that the true source of this is the enemy, who truly is the devil. But with the same token, people also have to take responsibility. The devil uses people. You have to be a willing vessel to be used to that capacity, to where it becomes a great evil, a grave evil. It's okay to feel upset. It's okay to feel hurt. It's just not okay to stay there. It's okay to admit that we don't have all the answers. No man does. Only God has all the answers. I can say that there is truly good and evil in every race, in every nationality, because racism is not just between black and white. Racism is not just a white officer murdering a black man. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes it involves other cultures. Sometimes it's a gender thing. Whether you call it racism, whether you call it discrimination, whatever you want to call it, it's all evil. So us as Christians, being spiritually minded, we have to respond with wisdom, the wisdom of God, not the wisdom of man, believing in the power of God. Sometimes that wisdom, beloved, requires different things. It's important to hear what God is saying. It's important to respond in a way that is productive, in a way that fulfills the voice and the plan of God. My way of responding right now to everything is just in prayer. I feel grieved over the situation that has happened with George Floyd. I'm just blown away naturally by it, but spiritually I'm praying through it. But I'm also grieved, beloved, that some people are getting a bad name for this. There are some bad things that are happening in our nation that simply aren't right. You have to call out all the bad. You can't just call out one incident. You have to call out all the things that are bad. And then you also have to acknowledge the good things that are happening. Let me say to you, I don't care where you live. I don't care what color you are. I love you because Jesus loves you. I love you because I love people, and I pray every day for the heart and the compassion of the Lord. That doesn't mean I'm perfect, but I do love you. Beloved, I want to read to you a couple of pages here from this book, Mr. Kagan. I feel led to read it. This is not at all about buying a book. I'm not advertising this book. I'm not telling you to go buy it. I want you to hear the words from this character. Again, this is a fictional book. This is a little novella. It was such an experience for me when I started writing this book, because I felt like I was writing the memoir of a real person. I could feel the heartbeat of this woman. I know it sounds a little crazy, but as I put this book together, beloved, I truly felt like I was sitting in front of this woman. I want to read the pages to you here, just a couple of pages from chapter 1. It says this: sometimes love just has to be enough to be felt, even if it is unable to be expressed and fully lived out. The fact that it exists and that it is real may be all that we are lucky enough to know. Even a glimpse or sparkle of love is better than no love at all. Love neutralizes hate and all things absent of love. Even a small sparkle of love is stronger than a mountain of hate. It can overcome a multitude of ailments. Love is surely the most powerful force known to mankind. I found love in a world of hate, slavery, and injustice. That love was the love of a man. I was a black girl in the midst of hate, racism, and separation in the state of Alabama. Despite what I saw around me, my father told me that love existed and that it was stronger than hate. Looking at my black skin and the way it was despised by others, it was hard to believe at first. Black people were different. Not only was the color of our skin different, but our hair was coarse and everything about our appearance was of a darker nature. We were the most different people in appearance from any other race. I often wondered if that was a blessing or a curse. For many years, it appeared to be a curse of endless agony. It's hard to forget the pain of the past, especially when that pain is rooted in pure evil and damages the soul. There's a thing in life called hope, but some die hoping to see hope manifested, and it never happens in their lifetime. The pain then intensifies as it is transferred to the next generation. In my early years, I heard much about the pain of the previous generation. I knew all the injustices suffered by my people at the hands of ignorance and supremacy. Time and time again, I heard about the 1896 landmark case of Plessy versus Ferguson, which gave the law in America permission to discriminate against blacks. It gave latitude to what it could not do to Italians, the Irish, the Jews, or others, just blacks. 20 of the states passed segregation laws under Plessy versus Ferguson. Some thought it was a humane act and even considered it restitution from the days of slavery. In reality, it legitimized a paradigm of two Americas, the white America and the black America. Everything was segregated: phone booths, soda machines, restaurants, transportation, schools, textbooks, even cemeteries. The blacks and whites lived in the same country, but could not ride in the same railroad cars, use the same bathrooms, or eat in the same places. In Atlanta, blacks who were witnesses in the court of law could not swear in on the same Bibles that whites did. Everything was separate, short of the oxygen in the air. Abraham Lincoln freed my people in 1863, but in every way that counted, we were still in bondage. Ironically, it was not only the blacks who were in bondage. The whites and those afraid of whom and what was different than them were more so in captivity. The mental slavery of their minds kept them from their own emancipation. Being different does not equal being bad, nor does it infer superiority. Dr. Martin Luther King said, "Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." The actions of one man, or even the majority of men, cannot speak for the entirety of mankind. Love is indeed stronger than darkness and hate. Love never dies, and even when it is unspoken or does not go as you expect or stay as long as you would have hoped for, it is still real. Sometimes love has to be enough just being felt. True love is without expectation. That was the code we lived by in my family. I'm going to stop here. This book, wow, it is quite riveting to me. Like I said, I feel like I was writing the story of a real person. But what I love about this book is it captures the reality, the facts of things that were taking place. But then it also overshadows facts with truth. God's truth. The truth that her natural father gave her. The truth about love being stronger than any hate that exists. There's a section in the Bible, I can't remember the chapter, the book, or the verse to tell you the truth. But I know I've read it where it says that we are to do good unto others, because if we only do good to those who are good to us, how are we different from anyone else? I'm going to wrap, beloved, today by saying this. We are all children of God. We all deserve dignity, honor, and respect. There are a lot of people out there who are providing dignity, honor, and respect. And for those who are not, they need to be called to action. Action for change. Action for accountability. The only thing that I would ask of you today, beloved, is just to pray. Pray and show love. Show love to God. Show love to yourself. It all starts at an individual level. And show love to those around you, those who are in your sphere of influence. I love you, beloved. That's my goal on each and every one of these programs, is to show love to God in my obedience and my worship of Him, and to show love to you by releasing to you what God gives me, by showing you what God has shown me, showing you this love of God that exists, and by telling you, I love being here. I love connecting with you here on this program. I pray it's been a time of blessing for you. Thank you for being here with me today. I will see you on Sunday.